The Tower of Babel. This is a video about Goombas. The Tower of Babel is the name often given to a series of verses in Genesis 11 of the Holy Bible. The scriptures tell the tale of a time when all of mankind spoke but one language. We were unified in communication. No differences in dialect, no altercations about word choice. We all just vibed in a strictly verbal sense, and with that amount of communication, we all were able to commit to a single massive project, a testament perhaps to just how well all of humankind got along. A tower so great, so mighty, so tall, that it reached the very heavens themselves. This is still, for the record, a video about Goombas. Eventually, God caught wind of the tower being built, and as was pretty normal for God in the Old Testament, he wasn't a real big fan of it. He was not amused. So the good Lord came down and, to stop the tower from being built, scrambled the tongues of mankind, confused our language forever. What once was but one way of speaking became so many deviations, iterations, and alterations of itself that mankind could no longer collaborate like that. Mankind could no longer get on the same page, could no longer understand each other's points well enough to commit to a single ideal. Never again would any man truly ever know peace with his neighbor. Hi, I'm Mario Unhinged, and this is a video about Goombas. Goombas are the first enemy encountered in the 1985 Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System or Famicom if you're feeling spicy. However, Goombas, and this isn't really like a secret or a mystery, but I think pretty much everybody knows this at this point, Goombas were not the first enemy added to the game. In fact, they were the last enemy added to the game. They were an afterthought. They were a patch for a problem Nintendo didn't know they had until the last possible minute. Playtesters thought the Koopas were a bit too much to manage. So Nintendo replaced not all of the Koopas, but a lot of the Koopas, with a new enemy that turned out to be the Goomba. An enemy that was simple, easy, basic. An enemy that didn't do anything complicated or fancy. It simply walked up. They didn't even have room left in the cartridge to animate this enemy. Instead, they just gave the Goomba a single still frame and flipped it one way then the other. And that's what its walk cycle would be. I emphasize this because there's a pattern that I want to point out, a through line that follows the Goomba all throughout its history, not just from a design perspective, but from a lore perspective, and I will get there, trust me. Goombas are insignificant. They are without meaning, and I don't mean like they have no purpose. I mean that their purpose, diegetically, narratively, however you want to put it, their purpose is that insignificance. In that insignificance, they find significance. I don't need to tell you that the Goomba is an icon. When you think of basic enemies, you probably think of the Goomba. Probably. You might think of the Dragon Quest slime or something else, but the Goomba kind of set the standard. You know what I mean? The ghosts in Pac-Man literally could not die. They would chase you forever, and the aliens and Space Invaders, they would eventually overwhelm you with their sheer numbers, but Goombas? If you know where the jump button is, the Goomba is already dead. And they kind of established the bar for enemies of that variety. Enemies that are just cannon fodder. Enemies that are just there to show you what victory looks like. The Goomba's name in Japanese is Karibo, which is sort of like chestnut or chestnut boy. A little chestnut guy. But why? He is clearly based on a shiitake mushroom. People at Nintendo have confirmed his resemblance to a shiitake and the being based on a shiitake. So if he's a mushroom, why is his name Mr. Chestnut? The reason he is named Karibo is that one of the programmers said to himself, you know what? He looks like a chestnut. And thus his name became Karibo. Which is a bit like when one guy calls you a dumb nickname at work and it just sticks forever. It's disrespectful, to be frank, and I want to again emphasize that this highlights his insignificance. Nobody cares about Goombas. Nobody has ever given the Goomba the love or the respect that he deserves. He is kicked to the curb constantly. He is the last one in line to get anything, and when he does, it's the sloppy seconds. I'm not gonna tell you there's a whole lot of depth to the Goomba, but I am gonna tell you they have gotten the rawest deal, I think, of any Mario enemies. And yes, I can already hear somebody in the comments, what about Mario World? Nobody knows why they look like that. Nobody, as far as I know at Nintendo, has ever discussed it. Hardly anybody outside of Nintendo discusses it, really. But there was a different design used for the Goomba in Mario World, and when this exact same enemy design later showed up in Mario 3D World, it was referred to as the Galoomba, and it appeared alongside the more traditional Goomba, implying that it is a subspecies or a distant cousin or something to that effect. So why do the Mario World credits and the instruction manual refer to it as a Goomba? That is the point I'm trying to make. Nobody cared. Nobody will give my man the time of day. Nobody will get his name right. Nobody will even look him in the eye to check if he's actually a Goomba. I am not going to get into the English etymology of the Goomba's name. That is, I'm gonna say, a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm not familiar enough with the culture or the history. I don't even know that many Italian Americans, and I myself am cracker through and through, honky Kong, very Caucasian. So I'm just going to point out that there may be some baggage attached to the word Goomba, and I'm gonna leave it at that. You can do your own research. I'm not the guy to talk about it. Goombas appear in name only in the 1993 Super Mario Bros. And I know what you're probably thinking if you've seen the movie even fairly recently. What do I mean, in name only? There's Goombas all over that movie.
Goomba! Yeah. Walk tall! Be proud! Go Goomba! Join the Goombas!
But if you look at the original pre-production art, the creatures referred to as Goombas in the final script were originally meant to be Koopa Troopas. They were designed to be Koopa Troopas, and it's only the Goomba's name that was taken. As far as I know, there is no artwork of a planned Goomba. There was no planned Goomba. Goombas weren't supposed to be in this movie, but the word Koopa is said so often.
That's right, the Koopa Man.
The great Koopa.
There's this guy, his name is Koopa.
Who's this Koopa clown?
Koopa! King Koopa here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like the Koopa special.
It probably made sense to take the de-evolved reptilian creatures and call them something else, and Goomba's right there. Everybody knows the word Goomba, so why not? It's not gonna hurt the Goomba's feelings, who cares, right? So what is the Goomba's backstory? What is the lore of the species? They are traitors to the crown, a mushroom who betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom. Now this is a very simple statement, but I think a lot can be read into it, and it's easy to start by just imagining a society inhabited by Goombas and Toads. What do we know about Goombas? They're diligent, they're hardworking, they're tenacious, they are always on the front line, always the first to die, always ready to do what they need to do. We don't see a lot of lazy Goombas. We see a lot of them not necessarily fighting very hard or very well, but definitely fighting. Toads, on the other hand, are not known for their perseverance or their tenacity or their work ethic. Toads aren't fighters. Who defended the Toads before Mario showed up? I'm going to posit that it may have been the Goombas, and that might have been part of the problem. Goombas doing all the work, Goombas putting up all the defenses, Goombas probably not getting their due, probably not seeing as much gratitude from the Toads as they would prefer. So along comes Bowser, and I imagine he made them some kind of offer. That in itself raises a lot of interesting things to think about for me, because Bowser doesn't normally play that game. Think about it. He's never tried to bribe Mario or negotiate with Mario or get Mario to turn turncoat, and I don't think I've seen him do that with any other characters either, not in any of the RPGs or anything. Bowser's a fighter. Bowser goes straight for it. Bowser does not convince his foes to betray their country. But as I suggested earlier, the Goombas may have already been looking for an out. They might have been ready to take any excuse to ditch these Toads. And to be fair, normally when we see Bowser, he's either on top of the mountain and has absolutely nothing to worry about, so why would he negotiate? Or we see Bowser at his absolute lowest when he really has nothing to offer, nothing to come to the negotiation table with. But I would like to think there's something a little more to it, something tactical. Mario, for all the hype he gets, isn't really much of a defender. He doesn't stop Bowser from kidnapping the princess half as often as he rescues her from being kidnapped. He is just one man. He can't stop Bowser from smashing his way in and doing what he wants. Mario will clean up the mess. Mario will avenge the fallen. But as far as protecting an entire kingdom from an entire army is concerned, Mario has his limits, and I think Bowser intimately understands that, in addition to having a heated rivalry with the plumber. I'm not going to suggest that Bowser actually saw the Goombas as a threat, but I am going to put forth the idea that an army of Goombas would make the Mushroom Kingdom more difficult to take. It would make Princess Peach a lot more inconvenient to kidnap. Bowser can sweep right past Mario and take the early win, and sure, he'll have to settle up later, but he'll cross that bridge when he comes to it. The Goombas, though? The Goombas present an issue, one that Bowser needed to take care of, and a good way to do that is to have the Goombas fighting for you instead of against you. Thus, the kingdom is left defenseless, and Bowser has himself a new frontline fighter. There are numerous myths comparable to the Tower of Babel in other cultures. Enmer Kar's ziggurat, for example, and the Great Pyramid of Cholula. Ovid's Metamorphosis speaks of a moment during the Gigantomachy, and I quote because it's a badass quote, "Rendering the heights of heaven no safer than the earth, they say the giants attempted to take the celestial kingdom, piling mountains up to the distant stars." Piling Goombas up to distant stars was nearly the name of this video, but I didn't want people to think it was just a video where I'm literally piling up Goombas and like Mario Odyssey or something. For the sake of simplicity, I don't want to discuss all the variations of the Babel myth. I just want to talk about the Christian version, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, and I'm quite familiar with the many interpretations of it. What does it mean? What is the point of the Genesis 11 Tower of Babel? What do we take away from it? It's a story about ambition, of course, hubris and pride, and all those old chestnuts. Mankind dared to build a tower so high it could reach heaven, and that spits in the face of God and nature. It's not in the version I read, but I've seen it put forth that the intent of the tower was to avoid a second flood should God decide to pull a Noah ever again. And for creating something as brazen as the Tower of Babel, man had to be permanently punished, as he often was in the Old Testament. The reason I keep bringing up the Tower of Babel, aside from the more obvious surface level symbolism, is the parallel it draws with the history of the Goombas. They were just little guys who did not like their lot in life. One way or another, living with the Toads was not doing it for them. Bowser offered them something, either directly or inherently, and they betrayed their own kind, divided their nation, split their culture, forever ruined a allyship across mushroom kind. And what did they do it for? Do you think the Goombas are happy? Do you think they're satisfied with their lot in life now? Do you think things are substantially better for them? Or do you think they're being fed into the wood chipper that is Super Mario? Maybe they thought they'd finally be appreciated. Maybe they thought this race of pathetic creatures ignored in and out of universe would finally get its due. Finally get their castles, their gratitude, their respect. Finally they'd be sitting on top and not just doing all the work. Spoilers, Goombas are doing all the work. Like 5 Goombas die for every Koopa. Bowser has turned them into bullet shields. He doesn't give them a whole lot of weapons. He doesn't refine his own strategy involving them a whole lot. When the invasion starts, he usually just starts throwing Goombas at it. Goombas have lost everything they had in the Mushroom Kingdom days, and they have gained little, if anything, in exchange. It is very much a tale of reaching too far. But much like the Tower of Babel, I don't feel like it's reaching too far. I don't feel like a tower that's too dang tall should intimidate God. And I don't think the Goombas are being punished justly for the crime of betrayal. I can't even say with certainty it was a crime. Maybe the Toads deserved it. I don't know, man. I wasn't there. But for Goombas to be treated like utter trash the way they generally are, and I don't mean that diminutively towards Nintendo or in any sort of aggressive way. I mean, that is very much their character. As I started this video with, insignificance is kind of their deal. That is what they do. That is where they are. That is their spot. Their presence seems to range from unwanted to outright hated. The Japanese instruction manual explicitly called them evil. The problem may be that I myself am reading a bit too much into the Goomba. I see a little bit of myself in the Goomba. Because I understand that feeling. I know that feeling of people looking right through you or looking at you like you're not supposed to be there. That feeling of people only tolerating you because they have to. That feeling of only being worth what you can provide in terms of service. And the second you stop being useful, being thrown to the curb. Being offered one thing and then being given something entirely different. Betraying your own values, betraying what you believe in, what you care about, giving up safety for what seems like a guaranteed win, only to have it all blow up in your face. They're doing the best they can, and the best they can do just isn't good enough. They are just not enough. No matter how many numbers they have, they're not a threat to Mario. No matter how hard they push, or how much sweat and blood they put into it, the Goombas aren't kidnapping any princesses on their own. Nobody cares about them as a people. Bowser only wants them because they are handy. Not necessarily effective, not necessarily powerful, but they do fill up space. They do keep the plumber busy. They are boots on the ground. And I know that feeling, and I hate that feeling of meaning nothing to nobody unless I am sacrificing myself to solve your problems for you. I've worked a lot of places for a lot of different bosses. I have lived through numerous presidents and military conflicts. I have been a wage slave, and I have sacrificed a lot for minimum wage. I have known many soldiers who don't look fondly on their time in the service. I don't know a whole lot about the Goomba, but what little I do, I get it. I get it. I would also describe my relationship with God as adversarial at best. Do I believe? I want to. I want to believe that I'm someday going to reach the pearly gates and then me and the good Lord are going to throw hands. Fucker owes me some answer. Goombas aren't one-trick ponies, though. They have over the years tried a few different tactics and pieces of equipment, different approaches to combat. It's never substantial and it's never very effective and it never really lasts past one game, which further drives home the impression I get that they're just getting the crumbs. Whether it's wings or tails or balloons, Bowser's got some laying around and he says,
Leave one crate for the course.
and then he boots them out the door. There is one big, notable Goomba move that I am building up towards. But before I get there, I am obligated to take a small detour and discuss what is probably the Goomba's most famous armament, the Karibo shoe. Why a shoe? I don't think anybody at Nintendo has ever discussed the origin of this, and it drives me crazy every time somebody gets the opportunity and doesn't ask. What inspired the boot? Certainly I can speculate. The Goombas are foot soldiers. Maybe it's a reference to athlete's foot and other foot fungus. Maybe there was supposed to be like a whole Goomba Voltron, but the other participants got stuck in traffic. I don't know, and I will probably never know. But the shoe is good, the shoe is cool. I feel like one of my favorite new Digimon designs actually borrowed from the Karibo shoe concept, but I can't prove it. In Mario Bros. 3 World 5, there is a tower. It is not numbered like the normal levels, it is numbered like a fortress. Aside from bearing a very strong physical resemblance to most depictions I've seen of the Tower of Babel, it is literally a tower from Earth to heaven. World 5 of Mario 3 is separated into two parts, one part on terra firma and one part in the clouds. By scaling the tower, Mario makes that transition. He reaches heaven via World 5 tower. Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that the tower is in any way, shape, or form an intentional allusion or reference to the plight, the fate of the Goombas. I'm not even 100% sure that the World 5 Tower is a reference to the Tower of Babel. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of towers to heaven in mythology and religion and folklore.
Hey!
But I mention it, one, because how could I not mention it? And two, it does suggest the very faint possibility that Nintendo is aware and thinking about not everything I'm discussing today, certainly not, I'm a lunatic, but there is something very funny to me about the Goombas' most prominent strategy as of late, the thing that has innovated Goomba combat. The hit new craze that is sweeping the nation since at least Super Mario 3D Land. Stacking Goombas on top of each other. Just at a glance, the idea of Goombas stacking on top of each other is a tactic so direct, so concise, so goal-focused, that it's beautiful. It's brilliant. If your main problem is Mario jumping on top of you, stack so high that he can't do that anymore. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Now, that doesn't prevent him from throwing fireballs or hammers at you. That doesn't stop him from hitting you with his tail or his cape or his fists. It doesn't stop him from kicking a block or a shell at you. Unlike most Goomba strategies that only last one game, the Goomba stack has been seen in a lot of places. It is a very cool move, and it costs them very little, so yeah. There's even a series of quests in Mario Odyssey that require you to stack Goombas in order for a Lady Goomba named Goombette, not Goombella. Don't make that mistake. Google will try to make the mistake for you. Some of the Goombettes you encounter just want to see Mario as a Goomba. You take over a Goomba's body, you walk up to her, and immediately she is smitten by that big ol' mustache. No big deal. But other Goombettes require a little bit more. A man who's tall, dark, and handsome, but mostly tall. And this cracked me up the first time that I saw it because he's not really a taller Goomba. He's not any braver for reaching this height. Mario did it for him. This Lady Goomba is just really dumb, I guess. I don't know why. I didn't know why. I'm gonna put that note there because I'm coming back to it. Another high point for stacking Goombas is Dr. Goomba Stack, a character introduced in the Dr. Mario mobile game. He is in fact just 3 Goombas in a trench coat, and they are letting him practice just like everybody else. I love Nintendo, but there's not a whole lot of Mario characters that I would let do medical type things to me. I'm just saying. The presence of Dr. Goomba Stack raises a new question though. Was Goombette stupid, or is everybody stupid? Am I stupid? What if nobody's stupid? What if these Goombas know something I don't? There's a type of character in fiction, and I really do not know if there's a word for it or if it's even really been codified. Characters that are independently almost identical, or at least functionally identical as far as the plot is concerned. They have slight variations in personality or appearance, but at the end of the day, they're 2 peas in a pod, or 5 peas in a pod, or however many peas it takes. When this type of character really shines, though, is when they combine, and they have some method of doing so that doesn't just turn them into one new individual. It seems to combine their stats across the board. They become bigger, stronger, more powerful, maybe even smarter. What if these Goombets are falling for these big Goomba stacks like they're single Goombas, because a Goomba stack is ostensibly, effectively, just one big Goomba? The smartest of regular Goombas can't cut it as a doctor, but what if 3 of them in a stack can? What if these Goombas actually are getting tougher, smarter, more charismatic, just by stacking on top of each other? What if they're gaining the benefits of every Goomba in the collective? The 17th and final kingdom in Mario Odyssey is a hidden kingdom. You have to have 500 moons just to unlock it, and it is meant as a sort of post-game challenge. All this to say, the darker side of the moon is a very, very difficult area. It is easily the hardest series of obstacles in Mario Odyssey. I don't even think I beat Darker Side of the Moon. If I'm being totally honest, I don't remember. I think I just watched somebody else do it. But that's the thing. I remember, of all the things in it, all the ridiculous combinations of hazards, all the really tight platforming, the thing I remember most about Darker Side is the beginning of it. At the beginning is an enemy called a UFO, and as its name implies, it's a bit like a flying saucer, but it's also a bit like a hat, because everything in Mario Odyssey has to be a hat. I'm not judging, I love hats, I'm just saying, there's a lot of hats. For the most part, it's here to drop off Goombas, and that explains a lot, like how did the Goombas get here when I had to jump through so many hoops and collect so many things to arrive? Well, they've got a flying saucer, they had a free ride. Okay, no problem, I can't argue with that. But what are they doing here? Because this is the hardest part of the game. This is the greatest challenge, period, and these are just Goombas. Like, they aren't Para-Goombas, they aren't Tanuki Goombas, they aren't even Balloon Goombas. They are just Goombas. There's a lot of Goombas here, but they're not already stacked when you arrive. You can stack them. By all means, it's the main strategy for taking out the UFO, but what is the point of these Goombas from a Doylist or a Watsonian perspective? And the answer from a design point of view may simply be to put the UFO in there for one last fight after a couple revisits of it throughout the game. It's kind of a reoccurring mini-boss. And starting off relatively easy seems like a nice thing to do, almost lulling you into a false sense of security for what comes ahead. Yeah, it's just a bunch of Goombas, no big deal, right? This'll be a breeze. Oh, the Watson in me, though. His gears are turning. I think the Goombas may have been there to take the challenge themselves. They are not in a stack yet, but I think that might have been the plan. I think one Goomba could not do this. One Goomba couldn't come anywhere near doing this, but a whole gaggle of Goombas, a cornucopia, a big ol' pile of them, a murder of Goombas. Could that be enough? Am I even right about the idea of them fusing through stacking? I don't know, but I like to think. I want to believe. And I want to believe for several reasons. One is that the idea of fusing by stacking is so funny. It's so good. Like, of course they wouldn't have a fusion dance with flashy effects and special. No, they're Goombas. The most Goomba thing imaginable is for them to do the crudest, simplest, most bare bones, dead brain thing possible. One Goomba on top of another. Is that 2 Goombas? No, that is one Super Goomba. I love that. I love that idea. And the stacks have been getting higher and venturing into more dangerous places and doing more impressive things than the average Goomba can accomplish. It plants the seeds for Goombas to get their second shot, to rise above, so to speak. One Goomba by itself does nothing, accomplishes nothing. It is put on this earth to be crushed underfoot. But they are finally beginning to understand. They are finally beginning to communicate, not the way that they used to, but in a new way. And in that, they can be better. They can be stronger. They can be sexier. And maybe they can be more than the dregs of society, more than the first level 1 schlub to show up, more than cannon fodder. The symbolic tower did not reach heaven, but maybe this one will. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it and the Goombas aren't really stacking anywhere. Or maybe I am reading it accurately, but this too is going to blow up in their faces somehow and they are going to stack more plight atop themselves. I don't know. I cannot say, but every time I see the parabola of an actual plot in a Mario game, whether on purpose or completely by accident, even the faint smell of storytelling just gets me going, man. Wakes me up in the morning. And I want to believe that the towers I'm building today themselves aren't just sequels to previous catastrophes. I see the Goomba in myself and myself in the Goomba. Not just myself, but humanity. The parts that I care about anyway. The working class, the poor, the ill, the underappreciated, the so-called insignificant. What is supposed to be merely a cog in the machine. Each of us individually have no power, but together, we the people, we the Goombas, we can all see heaven together. And then when we get there, you can all join me in beating up God. If we gang up, we can take him. What's he gonna do? Send everybody to hell? We got this.